It's the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And it's lights out, and away we go.
It has been roughly 3 and a bit weeks since the much anticipated F1 Manager 2022 released, and I, like many others, have been having an absolute blast on the game. It hits many right notes in the look and feel of the F1 world, some better than actually the EA sim of F1 2022 in my opinion. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, and in today's video we are taking a look at 10 things that F1 Manager 2022 needs to improve upon. By and large, the good points about this game, for me at least, outweigh the negative points, but there is no getting away from the fact that the game is let down by some fairly significant bugs and flaws in gameplay. So whilst this list might come across as a negative one, I do want to stress that this is more of a wish list of things to fix. This isn't necessarily a rant, this isn't me being overly critical of the game, and it certainly isn't me trying to put people off from actually buying the game. What this is though is a fairly definitive list in my opinion of all the things that are currently in the game that need improvements, and make no mistake, if they manage to correct the majority of these, this will be an absolute gem of a sports management game. So with that in mind, let's jump straight in to number 1. The game does a tremendous job at immersing you in the world of Formula 1, and especially over the race weekend. The sound and look of the game is for the most part bang on. But there is one issue on race days, and in particular in qualifying, that definitely risks breaking that immersive feel. Whilst it is definitely worse on some tracks than others, and I'm looking directly at you Monaco, the AI unfortunately appears to be coded in such a way that it only gets out of the way of faster cars in the race or in their flying lap in qualifying at certain points on the track. Now one could argue that perhaps you should do a better job of finding clear air when you send the car out, but it's impossible to predict when the AI will send out their drivers to do their qualification laps, so you could be undone through no fault of your own. It is really frustrating to watch your final attempt at a fast lap in, say, Quali 1, only to be scuppered by a car on a cooldown lap that is seemingly pre-programmed to wait for 3 more corners before it will get out of the way. And whilst it's funny to watch it when it happens for your drivers when they're blocking others, and in theory the more nefarious players among you could probably deliberately ruin their competitors' laps. But make no mistake, this is an overly frustrating part of the game, and when you're in the heat of the moment, especially if you're trying to get into like Q2 for example, if you've got a car that's kind of on the cusp of breaking into that next barrier or the next band of competitiveness in a race, it is really frustrating if your lap is ruined by a slower car. Currently, there is nowhere near enough of an offset in time difference between the tyre compounds. While switching to mediums or hards halfway through a race may yield better times thanks to the lower fuel levels and the fact that the softs might end up being very worn at that point, even at full tilt on fresh tyres, the offset is not enough. There's been some information published that I've seen on Reddit which actually showed that the performance on worn tyres doesn't seem to drop off until your tyres hit around 30% wear left on the tyre, effectively meaning there is no need to burn through fresh sets of soft tyres in qualifying when a set of slightly worn tyres will be just as quick. Hopefully this is a simple tweak they can make, because without those larger offsets in tyre performance between compounds, it does make strategy a bit meaningless, as almost every race can be done on a one stop due to the lack of performance drop off and the fact that hard tyres are not nearly as slow as they should be compared to the softs. This sort of leads on from the point we were just talking about, and from what I can tell, the tyre wear seems incredibly linear. It doesn't seem to be affected by track abrasiveness, track temperature or ambient temperature, your car's brake cooling effectiveness, the driver style or aggression levels that you've set for your driver on the track, perhaps running in dirty air too much. All of these things on a race day would massively affect the tyre wear. And as I mentioned before, in qualification, there's no point in using a brand new set of soft tyres or burning through a brand new set, because a scrub set of tyres that may be 10% worn, they're just as fast, if not faster in some cases. Now, whilst I think there needs to be a change made in the way that the tyre wear works with all the things we've just spoken about, just to make it a little bit more unpredictable and prone to change, there are some possible theories flying around about the fact that it might actually be that the performance drop-off on worn tyres could be down to the fuel burn-off and the performance boost that you get in your lap times as the car gets lighter, as it burns off that fuel. And I haven't seen this confirmed anywhere, but again, hopefully this, if that is the case, this is something that they can tweak in the game code and won't require a massive patch, or even worse, waiting until next year's iteration of the game. This is a tough one, and I was a little bit actually unsure about whether I should even include this on my list. It is a minor point for me, but if we take the point about immersion, which is something the game has leaned on a lot, especially in the media talk and the hype before the game came out, the aggressive nature of a car changing direction through corners or pulling out alongside another car, it's almost like it's on a Scalextrics track, where they change lanes on a Scalextrics track. It's so instantaneous that there's just no smooth movement to it, and it can break that immersion at times, especially if you're watching two cars sort of scrap for position. It can be quite frustrating. This one is unlikely to be fixed probably until the next game. I think this is quite a fundamental part of the game that I don't think would be fixed with a simple patch. I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but I would definitely like to see this improved upon in future iterations of this game. The game actually gives you quite a daunting level of statistical information for your car, with tons of numbers representing every level of that car's performance, from G-force levels to downforce levels, etc. And it is really cool to be able to develop parts and facilities, but unfortunately it does sort of seem that you can do so without ever being concerned about running out of money, and you are also able to do it at a much faster rate than the AI seem to improve things. There is even a bug at the moment that allows you to adjust the sliders of the focus areas of a new part all the way to the right, so that they heavily focus in every single area, effectively giving a massive buff, or a maximum buff, to every aspect of that new car part. Now clearly that's not meant to happen, and clearly that if you focus more heavily in one area, the offset is supposed to happen that you then lose focus in another, and therefore you have to maintain a balance depending on which area of that part you want to improve upon the most. But currently you can just whack everything up to the max and just make huge strides upon your competition. It would be good if there was a little bit more of a critical decision making process to go through. At the moment you can just design part after part after part, never really run out of money, and the same goes for facilities. You can almost guarantee you're going to make a profit in every single race, which means that you can just keep building facility after facility with almost no drawbacks. This unfortunately means that there's no real strategy to it, because you can just sort of almost build without consequence. Now, I haven't built all the way up to the maximum facility levels, but at the moment the strides in which I'm making on the track in terms of how well the cars are performing, it almost feels like you don't need to. On the note of facilities, I would like to add that the refurbishment aspect of the facility upgrades needs to disappear. Effectively what happens is over time the idea is that the facility will age and it will become outdated and it will become worn and it will be in need of a refurb. Now this comes at a cost of the productivity, so if a particular facility gives you a boost in one particular area, the idea is that over time as that building becomes older, the productivity level goes down and the performance buff goes down with it. But the problem is that it happens so quickly, so you spend £2 million on a new state-of-the-art facility and in 6 months time it's already had a negative buff put on it because it's in need of a refurb, and all of a sudden you've got to spend another £500,000 to refurb it. Now whilst from a monetary point of view it's a drop in the ocean in this game, but it just seems like a layer of micromanagement that really isn't needed and really doesn't add anything to the game whatsoever. In my experience so far, the AI just does not react in an expected way to changes in conditions and changes in race situations. In particular, things like weather, virtual safety cars or full safety cars. Now, everyone who watches Formula 1 will know that when you see a car in the barrier or you see a car stopped out on track and you anticipate a virtual safety car, or perhaps you're watching a weather radar knowing that when a rain comes, it's all about timing and when you're going to change your tyres. Ultimately, those decisions are made in split seconds in real life. You have to decide, right, should we come in for new tyres? Can we take an opportunistic pit stop at this precise moment in time? And of course, it can make or break a race. But I've had races where the track is effectively in full monsoon conditions to the point where in real life it probably would have been red flagged, and there are drivers still out on track on soft tyres. The AI seems to refuse to double stack, even when it would clearly be beneficial to do so, and overall the AI just I just wish they would make better decisions with this. Now, I'm happy for one team here and there to sort of take that Ferrari level risk or Ferrari level fuck up or whatever. But for me, to steal a march on another team so much, it cheapens the decision that I've made. I mean, initially it's going to feel like, oh, you know, I've made a split-second decision, it's paid off beautifully because I've gained 5 or 6 places. But actually, when you take a step back and look at it, what you've actually done is just taken advantage of a really poor AI decision, and it cheapens that success a little bit, which is quite disappointing. And I'd like that difficulty level raised. I'd like the AI to make better decisions in those moments, because some of them are so basic in terms of the decisions. It's so obvious that you need to switch to wet tyres. It's so obvious that at that moment it would be beneficial to take a pit stop there and then. You know, these are fundamental things that every single team, more often than not, will get right on a race weekend. I literally have no idea how the fuel delta is calculated in this. It seems to just make it up, as far as I can tell. It's so easy to make the fuel back, and then the next minute you seem to be either massively in the red or massively in the black. Now, running behind a car for lap after lap after lap, which is something we'll get into later, it's going to save fuel if you're running constantly in the slipstream. You're not trying to punch a hole through the air all the time, so the car is going through the air with less resistance, therefore less fuel is being used. But outside of that, it just seems so inconsistent and random. It just fluctuates all over the place. Telling a driver to push hard for better lap times should not put you in the negative, like a 5-lap negative offset of fuel after just 2 laps of pushing a bit harder. I mean, look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's actually how it is in real life, but it just does not seem right to me at all. Now, this issue cropped up actually really early on in the season for me. Now, when the safety car is out, of course, in real life, as we know, normal circumstances when the rules are being followed, lapped cars unlap themselves and catch up to the back of the pack, and the rest of the train is also allowed to catch up. More often than not, that doesn't happen. The lapped cars unlapping themselves certainly doesn't happen. Now, going back to the point I said about the blue flag earlier, this can have massive implications on your race if you've got 2 or 3 back markers between you and the next car in front, and it takes you 6, 7, 8 corners of a lap to get past them all. The guy in front of you on track could be 6, 7, 8 seconds up the road by that point because of how slow those cars are holding you up. Now, in terms of the safety car train itself, I'm not sure whether the train is going too fast. I'm not sure whether everyone else is going too slow, but it seems to take an age for everybody to catch up to the back of the pack. And on the topic of the VSC Delta, now, the gaps, they're just, again, very inconsistent. Now, for me, I would imagine, given how slow the cars are going when the VSC kicks in, you know, it neutralises the race. Everybody runs at a set pace to try and maintain gap distances so that no one benefits or loses. It seems to grow too much for me. Now, generally speaking, I would assume in that situation, because of the fact that you're going very slow, you can turn the engine mode down, you can back off on your tyres, and you can probably put the ERS into harvest mode. To me, that would seem like a smart move. Now, even with that all taken into account, I would expect my driver to be able to maintain the required delta speed. These are Formula 1 cars at the end of the day. We're not asking them to go full throttle here. To ensure the gap to all the drivers is maintained, I would expect those settings to still be able to do that. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem the case. If you turn all those settings way down to try and, you know, conserve a little bit of fuel, try and conserve his tyres a little bit more and maybe cool them down, you end up losing at least a second, maybe even 2, to the driver behind you. And it just doesn't seem right. And even if you have to put their levels back into the default middle levels, you still seem to lose time. Again, I don't know whether it's because the other cars are going too fast or whether your car is going too slow, but I should not have to put my drivers into an aggressive driving style and an aggressive fuel mode to maintain a gap under a VSC. So that definitely needs sorting, and I'm hoping that is something they can sort very quickly. I mean, this one is kind of funny as it is eye-rollingly poor. Multi-car incidents don't look too bad, and despite the fact that most of the time, just even when the incidents themselves are really rather aggressive in terms of how the cars hit each other, they both seem to carry on. They don't actually seem to be out of the race, which is, you know, another issue, I suppose. But there are some lesser impressive looking incidents that are game breaking or race ruining, perhaps is the right way to put it. In particular, I'm talking about when cars stop randomly on the track or slightly off track when they've run a little bit wide, potentially even slamming the brakes on and waiting for a gap to get back into traffic. And I've even seen cars doing that when they're coming out of the pits, that even though they're racing for position, they'll slam on the brakes to find a gap to get into the pack and potentially lose 2 or 3 places. And of course, you've got the really quite poor looking incidents where a car on its own, having an incident all to itself, will just go off the track at full speed without any attempt to brake or turn and just plough into a wall. Now, I appreciate that they're just trying to simulate the fact that the driver's made a mistake and he's put it in the wall. I get that. I get that it's you're effectively being asked by the developer to just imagine that the driver has made a mistake and not focus on what it visually looks like. But again, it's all down to that immersion. And sometimes when you see these things, it does break that. So I think it's going to be tricky for this to be fixed. I think that looking for hyper-realistic crash animations is probably asking a bit much, especially in their first attempt at this game. But I am hoping to see strides and improvements made in that in either future updates if it's possible, but certainly in future iterations of the game. Finally, this one is a bit of a frustrating one, and it could be for many different reasons, perhaps even linked to some of the issues that we've spoken about earlier with things like inaccurate tyre performance and performance offset on tyre compounds. But too often DRS trains are formed that just never get broken, and until a pit stop round, you can literally sit there and watch your car swap positions over and over and over again for lap after lap after frustrating lap. And you can turn all your settings up to the max, right, and tell your driver to go mad, and he will pull away and he will extend that gap. But the second you tell him to drive at a normal pace and stop pushing the car so hard, the AI just instantly start reading you in almost every time. It can be really, really frustrating. It's, again, not game breaking, but I would like to see a little bit more, or rather a little bit less emphasis being put on these DRS trains to encourage these on-track scraps and fights for positions. So there you go, that is the 10 things that I wish to see improved in this game, and it is an extensive list, and one could argue that there are some fairly fundamental flaws in there. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that in qualifying you can see that people are getting grid penalties, but you don't know for what reason or for how many positions that they are being penalised for. I haven't yet seen an issue at a pit stop for a slow pit stop. The fact that the commentary is absolutely dreadful, or the fact that there doesn't appear to be any retirements in a race due to mechanical failures. You don't get any random punctures, for example, or certainly none that I've seen so far. You don't get any engine, gearbox or other technical failures at random. It would appear that the only way that you might get one of these failures is if you ran your tyres all the way down to 0% wear or did the same with your main car components, which would be ridiculous because, why would you make a conscious decision to do that? It would be obviously incredibly frustrating if you got a DNF for one of these reasons, for a random puncture that destroyed the back end of your car or an engine blowout. And I understand that there has to always be a balance between gameplay and fun. But if it's realism that you're going for here, which clearly it is with Frontier, then these must be included for me. And because, these are things that affect teams in real life. These are things that unfortunately plague teams, these unexpected moments that happen in motorsport. Now, I appreciate I've gone through a lot here and I have spoken at length about many issues hurting the game right now, but I must still reiterate that this game, even in its current state, is still fantastically good fun. It is rare that a game can have so many fundamental flaws and bugs that require fixing, but you can still have such a good time with it. Now, right now, none of these flaws that I've spoken about are actually making me not want to play the game. I can live with all of them. But in my opinion, if Frontier can get on top of these issues, either in patches or updates or in future iterations of the series, then these games, or this game, will go from being a good game to potentially being one of the best sports management games of all time. I genuinely believe that it could be that. So thank you everybody for sticking with me for this long. Hopefully you've enjoyed my opinions on the state of F1 Manager 2022 at the moment. I know there are some patches and updates in the works. I'm hoping some of these issues are going to get addressed. I've seen and heard rumours that some of them are, which would be amazing. So yeah, fingers crossed that they can make some real inroads into this game across the next few weeks and months to come. So to wrap up then, all I can ask is that if you've enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button for more content. Comment below on your thoughts on this game and the potential fixes coming out. Let me know if there are any other frustrations with this game that you guys experienced. And of course, if you liked the video, hit that like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike. And we'll see you all in the next one.